Welcome everybody to week 8. Hard to believe it that we're this close to the end. It's been a wonderful experience so far and we're looking forward to finishing strong with you all. Here is the list of cohort numbers. So again, if you can go ahead and rename your participants so Corey can assign you into the right breakout rooms, that'd be great. And yeah, here we are, week 8 of the 10-week program. Next week is going to be our last week of content. And then after that, we have a week off. And then following that, we have graduation, which has been an exciting event to build towards. And Caroline's going to share a little bit more in a second about what all we have in store for you. But today is week 8. We're going to talk about sales and how to make it rain. So here we are in the program.
Don't have a rename.
Some questions.
And please do remember, if you can, to mute yourself if you're not speaking. Great. So yes, as I was saying, graduation, September 16th is right around the corner. We do want to have all of you register through Eventbrite, and one of our team members can drop that link in into the chat now so you can see it. We'll also include this in the homework, but this will get us a sense of who all is able to attend. Please do feel free to share this far and wide because we're making it quite an exciting event. We've got a good number of speakers. We've got that pitch fest we're talking about. We've got prizes, so it's going to be quite an exciting one. In addition to that, before that, however, we do have today's wonderful featured speaker, Caitlin Gill, who's the director of the Oregon Sales Academy. We'll read her bio in a second. But that's where we're at. And then next week we have Cohort's Choice was filled up with requests for more information on SEO, selling with social media, and Google Analytics. So Kent Lewis from Anvil Media, who is the president, is gonna come to speak with us about that. In addition, you're going to hear a lot more from Anvil's team, and I'll pass it off to Caroline to chat about what that looks like.
Thank you, Raj. And a couple good questions coming in too I wanted to address. Sarah asked if you need to donate to attend the graduation, because when you first pull up the link to register, we have a donation suggestion spot. You do not need to donate. That is optional. And we're putting that on there because every dollar we raise, we're going to use as cash prize money to give back to you guys for prizes, which will be awesome. So hopefully we'll get some money for you guys there. And then another question was, during Labor Day week, even though we don't have a Rainmaker workshop, we will still be offering our mentor hours, and the whole focus will be on helping you hone your sales pitch. So that's why it's really important that you guys are here today with Caitlin. Okay, so the Digital Marketing Resiliency Kit, you guys have been hearing me talk about this now for several weeks, where we submitted a grant to Business Oregon, and we did receive 1/3 of what we asked for, which means we are still able to offer the Digital Marketing Resiliency Kit with our partner Anvil, which is an incredible digital marketing firm. You're going to learn a little bit more about them. And actually, Kent, the owner, CEO, is your speaker next week for the open cohort choice session that we talked about. So here's what you're going to get. And again, the caveat here is you attend 8 of the 10 sessions. You turn in your homework. Again, we're not checking the homework. We just want to make sure you're going through those motions so that you can actually get the most out of this resiliency kit, because this is worth thousands and thousands of dollars, you guys, what Anvil is doing for you for a small amount of funding. The funding is actually from the CARES Act money from the federal government, sent to the state of Oregon, passed through Business Oregon to us, which is an incredible opportunity. So here's what you're going to get. You're going to get Google Ads set up, and you're going to learn how to create a really strong Google ad that will hopefully inspire clicks, and then click over to a landing page, which also Anvil will help you build. It will be optimized. It will have one clear call to action. Whatever that call to action is up to you. It might be a sale. It might be joining a newsletter list. It might be joining a webinar, an educational content, whatever it is. Once they click on that, you get them into your sales funnel, right? And then they're going to plug Google Analytics in. I know that many of you already have active Google Analytics accounts. They're going to make sure you have them set up properly, because 80% of people using Google Analytics are using it incorrectly. and they will show you how to monitor the data so that you can go back and customize the Google ad or customize the call to action on your landing page, or maybe change the image or whatever. So you can keep doing that rinse, recycle, repeat until you optimize and you start generating sales or conversions, whatever that is that you're looking for. So super great opportunity right now. Anna, you were telling me how many people were qualified for this. Was it only like 25 people so far, 21 people?
Yeah, 21.
Okay, so guys, there's 77 companies, more entrepreneurs, but 77 companies. So I know that many of you are working on your homework and you're going to get it in, but you do not want to miss this opportunity to receive this free service. So any questions on this before we move on to the next slide? Feel free to just unmute yourself if you have a question or post it in the chat. You're welcome, Annie. Okay, next slide, Raj. You can also ask them throughout the session or at the end of the session. So this is also, just to dig a little bit deeper, what you're getting in the kit beyond what I just showed you is there's going to be several 2-hour trainings set up with smaller groups of cohorts, you know, maybe 8 to 10 folks, where the Anvil team's going to talk deeper about SEO, analytics, landing page conversion. And then this is what's really phenomenal, you guys. They're going to do 2 to 3 hour private consultations one-on-one with you to deep dive and get into your accounts and make sure they're all set up correctly. This is why this is worth thousands of dollars and you don't want to miss out on this. And then they're going to build you a template landing page and then show you how to edit. It's super easy to customize these just by swapping out images and headlines and links. So again, that's available for up to 70 Rainmaker graduates, and we're only at 21 right now. So we want to make sure you guys get that homework in. So during Labor Day, those of you can have a burger on the grill or a veggie burger, whatever it is, but then get back to doing the homework. Okay, next slide, Raj. And just to clarify, because we did have a lot of questions around the videos, there's 2 1-minute videos that you guys should be submitting. The first one is a reflections. And again, this gives you a really good opportunity of testing out videos. You're going to introduce yourself. You're going to talk about the impact you've received from Rainmaker and one thing you're going to do differently this fall as a result of what you've learned. And then the next video is your sales pitch, which we're going to cover that today with Caitlin. So I'm not going to get too deep into that this moment. But again, also just 1 minute each. They can be videos. They could be audio recordings. And guys, don't worry about making them professional or fancy. We just want you to submit them, you know, pick up your phone, or if you want, talk to your cohort facilitator or one of the mentors. We'll set up a Zoom and we can record your pitch that way. We want to reduce the barriers to you guys doing this. And then next, we actually have a sample that we're gonna play this, Raj? Do you want to go ahead and play it, because it is a short sample that Ariel put together just to give you guys an example of how easy this is.
Sure, and just to clarify, there's a couple questions in the chat about the length of the first video. It would be ideal to keep the 30 seconds as we had put in the homework. That was my apologies, that slipped in the slides and it said.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yep, 30 seconds on the first one is ideal. Thanks. All right, here we go, featuring Ariel.
Hey, this is Ariel with the Hazel People. We make the world's finest hazelnut milk. And I was part of the Sales and Marketing Accelerator Rainmaker 2020. What I learned was to really understand my customer so that I can better target my sales and marketing efforts. And what I will implement in the fall is increase my prices, because now I have a better understanding of margin and I want more of that money coming home to my bank account. So I just want to thank everyone who was involved in making this happen. Here's to rainmaking.
Good job, Ariel. That's great. So just short, quick, easy. You don't have to worry about trying to do it 3 times. You can send us your first version or a second version, whichever you feel comfortable with. So, okay, next slide. And yes, we will have sample sales pitches as well to share with you guys. And then just to remind you, the prizes, we've assembled $8,000 in prizes. The first 7 is going to be distributed on a lottery basis. So you submit your pitch, your sales pitch, you attend at least 8 of the workshops, submit all the homework, really be supportive of others. This cohort is a strong group. You guys are getting to know each other really well. Participate and then actually engage with the mentors who are volunteering their time, either through the mentor sessions that we have. As you know, there's several a week, or you can meet with individuals separately. And it's actually 21 companies that are eligible, not 25. So just a slight correction on that. And then the next slide, Raj. This is on graduation day. 4 or 5 of the sales pitches will be selected by our team to actually do a live 3-minute sales pitch at graduation. And then we will put a poll up, and everybody who attends, which we're expecting a couple hundred people to attend your graduation, will do the votes. First place will get $1,000. So if you were fortunate to have received one of the first 1,000, you could potentially receive 2,000. Second place will receive a 90-minute consultation with Rachel from Muse Marketing, who you guys all heard from earlier in the program, really high-skilled digital marketing expert. And then again, I won't read the below part, but you all know by now the requirements that you need to fulfill in order to qualify. And again, we're doing this because we want you to get comfortable, and you're going to hear from Caitlin a little bit more about the sales process. But as a salesperson myself, it's like a muscle. And in the beginning, I was really nervous to do sales, but then once I started doing it and saw results, or I got no's and I had to figure out what the barriers were, it became super second nature for me. Do I still get nervous doing it now and then? Of course I do, especially if there's a big sale on the line or a big potential client on the line. But this is practice that's going to help make it much easier for you. Okay. And then are we back to you, Raj?
We are. Thank you. Thanks, Caroline, for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're really excited for this. I'm personally really excited to see all your submissions. So looking forward to those, and to clarify also that there will be some more instructions in the homework coming out for this week on what exactly to include in those pitches. Okay, well, moving to our sponsor slide, thanks to the wonderful folks that we have on board helping to make this program possible and support all of you. Yeah, we've been very fortunate to have good sponsorship throughout. And with that, let's transition then into today's session. It is on making it rain, figuring out how to put together not only the sales pitch itself, but also the context and all the research that goes into making sure that your sales pitch lands effectively. We're really excited to have Caitlin Gill, who's the director of the Oregon State Sales Academy, with us. She is, in addition to her role as the director, a professor in the College of Business. In her dual role, Caitlin utilizes her industry expertise to prepare the next generation of sales leaders at Oregon State University by providing sales education and industry-led workshops to students in all majors at Oregon State. Prior to joining Oregon State, Caitlin spent the past 12 years at Insight Software, which is the world's leader in financial reporting services. She earned her MBA from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where she also served as a member of the Women of MBA at UNC and promoted successful women in leadership. She serves on the executive board of the Sub-Saharan Education Project as treasurer, as well as a group travel leader. She's done a ton of work internationally, and we're really thrilled to have her here. So with that, I will stop my screen share and pass the mic to Caitlin. Thanks so much for joining us, Caitlin.
Unmute. Well, thank you very much, Raj. What a great introduction. I'm so excited to be here and so excited to talk to you guys about sales today. It's something I'm really passionate about as a person, and certainly a field that I didn't expect myself to be in, but fell into. So let me go ahead and share my screen here and see. We can see that. If Raj, if you can give me a thumbs up when you can see my screen. Oh, Carolyn, I see it. Perfect. Perfect. Wonderful. So like I said, I'm so excited to be here today. I'm so excited to talk to you guys about selling and sales, and some insight that I have gained in my 15 plus years of selling, and how I got into that field, and learn a little bit more about all of you, your companies, and what you do. So I wanted to start with this slide because this is a quote that I actually saw recently. A friend of mine, Deidre Jones, who runs a sales program at University of Toledo, was interviewed. And in the headline of her interview, she said this: great salespeople don't sell, they teach customers how to buy. And when I saw that, I thought, that is so impactful, because that is the true nature of professional selling. And that's really where taking the fear out of selling starts. So a lot of people assume, as did I before I started in a professional sales role, that sales was something where you had to have this certain personality or pizzazz to do, and that I would be rejected over and over again, and it would just be really scary and really horrible. And what I realized in my sales career was sales is a process, like everything else is a process. It's a relationship building skill. And when you're selling professionally and you work for a company that you're passionate about, it's actually quite easy to sell because you believe in your product and you're sharing that information with others. So I wanted to start by just sharing that quote with you guys. It really, I think, speaks volume about what sales, true professional selling is. So what we'll do today in our session is I'll give you a brief introduction. I really don't need to say much, and I don't want to talk about myself much during this session. I really want to focus on the sales process and you guys, and Raj did such a great job in the introduction, so thank you for that. But I did want to talk to you guys a little bit about my sales journey, how I got into sales, so you could see the pathway and the different roles that I've taken. But what I want to focus most on today is taking that fear out of selling. So how do you, as Caroline said, get comfortable with the sales process? And even after selling for 15 plus years, I also get nervous sometimes. And the elevator pitch that you guys will have to submit, I recorded an example last night, pretty late last night, for you guys, just to show how, off the cuff, it doesn't have to be perfect. Your example, it can be a little bit messy, and that's how you learn. So you'll notice in my example, there's definitely some ums and ahs in there. It's not seamless, it's not perfect, but that comes with time and practice. And that also shows to your prospect that you're human, right? So they're not expecting you to be perfectly polished every single time. And in fact, I'll share a story with you guys of how we won one of the biggest deals at Insight Software by being human, by relating to our customers more than having the perfect pitch and the fanciest offering to take them out to dinner. It was really more about learning about them and creating a relationship. So more on that in just a little bit. I have a pretty simple formula for success that I'll share with you guys as well, so we can talk about that as we go through. So again, how I got into sales and my background, it's pretty varied. I honestly feel like I've been selling my entire life. So I was that kid that always wanted to have a lemonade stand. I wanted to have a garage sale. I wanted to sell all of my belongings that my parents purchased for me, which they hated. But I really did like business from a young age. And I went to college. My undergrad, I went to East Carolina University, and I got my MBA at UNC. But there was a break in between there where I did a lot of work in the tech field. And when I got out of college, one of the things that I realized when I thought I wanted to go into marketing was most of the jobs that I wanted to have required a lot of experience. So I found myself in an interview with Uniforms. If you guys are familiar with them or familiar with Cintas, it's a uniform company. And it was an account executive role, and they wanted someone to have at least a year of professional sales experience, but I promised them that if they took a chance on me, it would be worthwhile, even though I had no idea what I was promising at that point. So it was a great first job, and I got a good taste of outside selling. My territory was Eastern North Carolina, so I spent a lot of time in my first business suit walking around floors of manufacturing facilities and fish farms and places that weren't as desirable to sell in. But I learned a lot about the sales process and quickly realized that I did want to work in technology sales. So I moved on from UniFirst to a startup called SageWorks and was one of the first 100 employees. I started off in an SDR role there, which for those of you that aren't familiar with that, it's a sales development representative, or it's a cold caller, for lack of a better term. And at SageWorks, as a startup, the reason I think a lot of startups hire a lot of young people is because they know they could put a couple ping pong tables in there and a keg of beer, and they'll pretty much stay there as long as you want them to and make as many cold calls as you want. So our quota was 150 cold calls a day, which, you know, that was a recipe for success, just churning and burning. Honestly, they figured if you made that many calls, you would eventually get somebody that would talk to you. Now, in today's world, I feel like there are much more effective ways that we can sell rather than making 150 cold calls. So definitely don't feel like that's what you have to do to be successful. But that's how I started, and that did teach me a lesson in resiliency. That kind of teaches you to become less worried about the no's, because you're going to hear them, right? And you'll hear them over and over. So I moved on from the SDR role into a consultant role, and did training and implementation for quite a while. And the interesting thing about that role is that you really learn the other side of the sales process. So when you're training or installing a piece of software for a client, you're soft selling them the whole time, but they trust you because you are a technical advisor, right? You understand their system. You're installing software, you're working with them through the process. So in moving into that role, it really taught me more about building relationships. So how important it was to build trust with my clients. And once I had that trust and I was working in their system and working with them, then the selling part became very easy, because they knew that the product worked and they knew that they had a relationship with me. I had spent this time with them. I knew a lot about them, so it made selling quite simple. And so I stayed in the sales engineering realm because I really feel like that's where I found my niche. I wanted to be in a role where I could be a part of the technical sales process as well as still be involved in the sales process. And so when I moved to Global Software, which eventually became Insight Software, I spent most of my time as a sales engineer and eventually sales engineering. And for those of you guys that aren't familiar with what that role means, it's more of a technical sales role. You're doing a lot of demos, you're doing a lot of trade shows, doing a lot of presenting, installing product, training product. So selling the whole time in a more technical sense. In that time period, another interesting sales part of my life was my work with SSEP. So Raj mentioned I work for an NGO called the Sub-Saharan Education Project. And we have several programs that we run in Ghana, a vocational program for women where we train artisans to make jewelry that we sell here in the United States. And we use the proceeds from that jewelry to fund a scholarship program and school build programs in rural Ghana and Accra. And so having my professional sales background coupled with a nonprofit selling realm was really interesting, because again, when you're selling for a nonprofit or trying to secure sponsorships or grants for a nonprofit, you really have to focus on building a relationship, telling a story. So that really taught me this whole other realm of sales that was very important in my professional career as well. How do you learn your customer's story and then weave your products into that story to make them successful? So all of that led me to where I am today. Last year, the summer of 2019, was offered a position at Oregon State as the director of their sales academy and teaching in the College of Business for professional selling. And this was a huge, scary leap for me, leaving the corporate world to move to academia. But I am so passionate about sales and teaching sales at the university level, because there are about 88% of marketing students nationwide that end up in sales careers almost inadvertently, just like I did, but without any formal sales training. And so I'm really passionate about growing our sales program at Oregon State to provide that training to students so they, like you guys, can come out of a program as fantastic as this one with some real sales skills that they can use to get their products on the market and create relationships with customers. So that's enough about me. Not going to talk about me anymore, but give you guys a little background about me and where I came from. So I'd like to start off by learning a little bit more about how you guys feel about sales. So we're going to start off with this poll, and just be completely honest here. From these 4 choices, what really makes you the most scared to sell? Is it fear of rejection? Is it your image? Is that you're doing it wrong? People won't like you? I'm really interested to hear your thoughts here. We'll give you just a minute to go through that poll.
And while that's going, Caitlin, I wanted to share that there's a lot of appreciation for that first quote that you had in the beginning.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Raj. I also wanted to mention, as you guys have questions, I definitely want to keep this open and interactive. Please ask questions, type them into the chat. I'll stop every couple of slides to answer any questions that you have about the content that we'll go through.
There's a couple questions also. What if their answer to this poll is none of the above? That was an option I guess we hadn't thought about.
Yeah, I would say if your answer is none of the above, please type into the chat why you are scared to sell, if you are scared to sell, but maybe none of the above is great because they're just not scared to sell. Yeah, I'd love to hear if you have if there's something else, what that is. Like we've got about 80% in. Fear of rejection, that definitely was a big one for me. And so one of the important things to understand is that part of the fear of rejection is honestly a lack of knowledge around the actual sales cycle. So what I find, especially with my students, is that if they've never been trained on the art of selling, they probably don't recognize that they should expect a certain percentage of people not to buy, right? So it's actually okay when people say no, and honestly, oftentimes it means that you're kind of churning out the business that's not going to be relevant to you and getting a little bit closer to the people that will actually buy. So I always like to tell my students when on one of our first or second classes that one of the most important words to be comfortable with in the sales process is no. And in fact, it's not just the no's coming from your prospect to you. Sometimes as a salesperson, you have to reject your prospect. That's part of the needs identification with the prospect. If it's not a good fit, there's no sense in pushing a square peg into a round hole. So no's go both ways, and that's part of relationship-based selling. Okay. So it looks like fear of rejection was number 1. I'll do it wrong is number 2. Now I have to tell you guys that when I first started selling, I'll do it wrong was number 1 for me. I felt like I just really was worried every single time I went into a pitch that I was going to do it wrong. I wasn't going to follow the right process. I wasn't going to say what the customers were hoping that I would say, or I was going to forget something, an important feature of my product that I really should have shared with them. And one of the things that I learned just in being in sales for so long is that you don't have to have all of the answers. And in fact, it's often better when you don't. So in the sales process and when you're in a pitch, I would appreciate as a prospect when a salesperson didn't try to make up an answer that they didn't know. It's always okay to say, you know what, that's a great question, and I'm going to make sure to consult with one of my technical experts. I might even get back to you before the end of this call, but if not, I'm going to use that as a follow-up item. So that is a perfectly good answer anytime in the sales process, and that should set you at ease knowing that you don't have to know everything. And it's okay if you do it wrong the first couple of times. People relate to people. People buy from people. So they don't expect you to be perfect. No prospect does.
Caitlin, here's a good one for you. I find this is common for a lot of people that because they don't really like sales, they offer their services for free for too long. Can you speak to that?
Oh my gosh. So yes, I can speak to that. One of our, I would say, just one of the biggest frustrations that I would have in selling technology is when salespeople would offer free trials. because one of the, as you said, Carolyn, the products that you're selling, they will have as much value as you hold them to have with your client, right? So I felt like a lot of our newer salespeople, they were very quick to say when they didn't know the answer, they were like, let's just try it for free. You can have it for free for 30 days. And what we would find when salespeople would do that is that it would devalue our product. Oftentimes, if they gave away a free trial, the client wouldn't be properly trained on how to use the product. And so it really came back and bit them in the long run because they wouldn't buy. So I think that, it's really important that when you do a proper needs identification, when you're listening to your client and when you're pitching your product based on their needs, that they will realize the value of the product and not bulk at the price. So if you're, a lot of salespeople are stressed out when it comes to actually talking about price and getting into contracts. But typically, if you've done your job well before then, that shouldn't even be a big issue. And I don't know if Carolyn, you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. And this is why I think a lot of software companies in particular will do a freemium model. I mean, they know that they want to do free first to give people a chance to try out the product, but you have to have built in your system conversion, right? Like they stop getting access to your product or whatever it might be. And that's where everything you guys have learned up until this point about the email marketing and the retargeting and the following up is really key. It's okay to give stuff for free, but not forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we would, and all that being said, as much as I hated free trials, it was something that we did. And we would have a kind of a dummy database that they would hook up to. I'll tell you guys a little bit about the product that I focus on most, and it's the product that's in the pitch that I'm going to share with you guys as well. It was a product called Spreadsheet Server. So what it did is it connected to databases like Oracle or SAP, and it pulled data real time from those systems into Excel for reporting. So someone like a controller, or a CFO, an analyst would be able to build their reports in Excel, but have that data be populated directly from their system. So it made their lives a whole lot easier because they were working with something they were comfortable with. What we would find in a free trial, if we were to just give them the product and let them install it and work with it, is that they wouldn't use it properly. But we would give them kind of a dummy database and a version of the product they could work with in a sandbox and use for free. So it was more of a controlled trial. But what we would tell them, again, you make that trial short, 7 days or less. We would always be involved in the process, so helping them along the way. And then again, once that 7 days ended, you have to go back to the value of the product and what it's going to deliver when they're using it properly, when they're trained properly, and they've had a little taste of how it can help them. So there absolutely has to be an end to that free trial. It can't go on forever. And you have to make sure that your client knows, as well as you do, how important it is that once they start using it, they will also begin to see the value and see that ROI. So you don't want to draw out that process, because that's, again, keeping them from saving the money that your product hopefully will save them if that's the type of product that you're selling.
Caitlin, I just wanted to read what Ani wrote, CEO of Zenpui, because I think you're going to love it. A way to get rid of the fear is to do some performance art, get on the stage, and eventually the fear will die out. And then if someone assumes a sales pitch is a performance, you're golden. I totally agree with that, and used to take theater for that reason.
Absolutely. And I love that. Thank you so much for chiming in with that. And one of the things I wanted to share in reading a lot of sales articles on selling and thinking about different ways to teach my students how to sell, one of the things that a lot of companies are doing right now, which I think is great, is they're taking their salespeople and putting them in improv classes. So improv comedy classes, theater classes, because there is a part of it that is, it is really important to be able to think on your feet, right? And so I think those improv classes are a great way to get more comfortable, if that's something that you guys wanted to do with your teams or even yourselves, just to get more comfortable with being on that stage, per se. Okay, any other questions or comments before we move forward? Okay, so taking the fear out of selling. you guys probably watched the video, or hopefully you watched the video, the bad sales pitch. I know the audio is kind of poor in that video, but it is one that I share with my students because it's just so bad. The guy is completely focused on his notes, not listening to his customer. But I'd like to just stop for a second and see if anybody has any other feedback on what you thought he did really poorly in that first video.
Caitlin, sorry, we have not sent that video out. We've included it in the homework that's going to go out.
Okay, great. Well, he does really bad. So I'm not gonna give away what he does bad, but maybe that's something we can talk about in the homework, an additional question that we add. So in a bad sales pitch, as you'll see in this video that you've sent out, one of the biggest things that people fall short on is the ability to listen, right? So you're so focused on what you're going to say as a salesperson. And what I always tell my kids and my own kids and the students I teach is that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? So one of the most important things in the sales process is learning how to actively listen and not being so focused on what you're going to say. Because if all you're doing is projecting features of your product to a customer, you're not going to do a great job in selling anything to them. So I have a sales process that I go through with my students that walks them through first the approach. So how do they kind of set the stage for what they are going to be talking about with a client? There are a couple important things that they have to do here to be effective, and some of them are pretty simple and obvious. You know, obviously, be appropriately dressed for the environment that you're walking into, and make sure to greet your client, their full name, their company, handshake. In the non-COVID days now, virtually, you just do a virtual high five. Make sure that you exchange contact information and also set the time and agenda for your meeting. So the last thing you want to do is end up in a meeting where you think that you have 30 minutes and the client cuts you off at 15 and says, actually, I have to go because you didn't confirm that time with them. And then when you get into the next portion, the needs identification, that's really where you dig into what is going on with their business. But a part of the fear of selling and where people get it wrong is they immediately go from their introduction to pitching their product, and they have a very product-centric pitch. So it's centered around features. They're telling the customer what their product does instead of learning about the customer's business. And that's really a much more dated approach to selling. Whereas if you go with the problem-centric approach, that's really focused on starting your pitch with that needs identification. So you're asking questions to get a deep understanding of the customer's current state. What are they doing today? And that way you can mentally think about how your product is going to help them. You can understand what's working and what isn't. So oftentimes when you're going through that needs identification and asking questions, which I've given you guys a pretty exhaustive list of ask in the needs identification that Raj will share in the homework. When you're asking those questions, make sure to dig deeper on every question, especially if you don't understand. So again, taking the fear out of selling, it's not knowing. Don't be shy if you don't understand something that they're saying. Feel free to always ask the question, can you tell me a little bit more about that? I just want to make sure I'm understanding exactly where you're coming from. And then also understanding the impact of the problems that they're having today in the future. So I tell my students when I'm talking about, the most important words in sales, one of them is about projection. So if they continue to do things the way they're doing today without your product or service, what does that mean for them in the future? And how will your product be able to help them if they were to install it or if they were to purchase it? And lastly, aligning the products and services that you have to help the customers reach or receive better outcomes. So it's really focusing in your pitch on that problem-centric approach in your needs identification instead of getting right into pitching your product or service. Do we have any questions on that? I just wanted to stop for a quick second here.
Hey, Caitlin, I'll ask a question, and this sort of relates to my own business. what do you do when you're selling a product that, like say a board game, where it's really not necessarily meeting a ton of problems compared to your thousands of competitors? It's just sort of a unique product that looks different and is fun and exciting. Like, how would you like maybe take this approach to like trying to still not be product centric?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, but I still think that although you may not be solving a problem per se, you're providing a service that is going to fill a need for that customer. So I think when you're talking to prospects, you still need to understand why they play video games. What is important to them about playing a video game? What are the outcomes that they want after they play the game, or what are they looking for in that experience? So I do think it's still very, very important to align what fun your game brings to what they're interested in, because they may say, I'm really focused on games that I can play interactively with someone else. Or I really like to play games where I'm able to play with a large group. So that way, when you're pitching your product, you can focus on their needs rather than just the features of your product.
Yeah, and I would add to that too, that in products that are in very crowded markets like board games or makeup or protein shakes, right? Health foods, those kinds of things. I am a sucker for the influencer marketing videos that as I'm scrolling through, and now all of a sudden I'm buying some concealer that I never thought I knew about before because of the influencer videos. Somebody, if you could mute yourself if you're
like thousands of dollars to have.
Hey, John T. Fogel, could you mute yourself, or else I'll
Unmute, sorry.
Thanks.
So just to circle back on that, the influencer marketing, getting other people to sell your product for you is golden.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%, Carolyn. And I think it's, when you're talking about the influencer market, that's telling a story, right? So when I watch those videos, just like you do, I can imagine myself, oh, wow, I can imagine myself in that same person's shoes. So it's telling a story and then figuring out how that fits with the customer that you happen to be speaking. It's a verbal pitch. Great question. Did that answer your question, or did you want to kind of dive deeper there?
No, that was great. I wanted to bring it up because I think a lot of people here, we sell like more consumer-based products. And so, yeah, the slide, it felt like, maybe like super understandable B2B, but it gets a little more nuanced when you're B2C. So. Sure, absolutely. But even B2C, it's still important to understand that the company and their customers and target market, right? So you guys have a target market. All those people have a story. They might have a similar focus. So it is important to understand what that is, and also what the company that you're selling to, what their goals are. Okay. So moving on from there, this is what I call my formula for success. So first and foremost, when you're starting the sales process, what you have to do is you have to build trust either with the client or company that you're selling to. So your ability to establish rapport with them is the most important first step. And if you botch this, it really doesn't matter how good you are at closing. If they don't like you, they're not going to buy. So I've definitely lost deals because they've liked someone else better than me, unfortunately. And that was for my lack of ability to build a strong relationship from the start. So I wanted to tell you guys a story about one of the biggest deals that we won at Insight Software. So as I mentioned, the product that was our claim to fame was that Excel add-in, and it plugged into any relational database and pulled data into Excel. So in year 10 that I was working there, we had been trying to secure Microsoft as one of our customers, because what better way to pitch your product, an Excel add-in, than to say, Microsoft, the makers of Excel, use it. But we just couldn't get the deal done, and we tried and tried and tried. So Microsoft used SAP. That was their system. They actually build their own ERPs as well, but the one that they chose to use to run their company was SAP. And in years and years of trying to get them to secure a demo, we really just ran into a brick wall every time. So I was at a trade show in Las Vegas, and Microsoft was there. They had a big presence there, and I was not going to let it go. So I ran into a couple folks out of the Seattle office, which is close to where we live in Corvallis, and I invited them to dinner with one of my colleagues, just to try to see if we could get a demo set and kind of start moving forward with them. And really the intent of the dinner was just to learn a little bit more about their business and what they were using for reporting today. And so, funny story here, after we had set the dinner invitation, they texted me and said, do you mind if we bring about 10 other employees from Microsoft? And I immediately was like, we're not a huge company, and I don't have that type of expense budget. And so I look at my colleague, I'm like, what do we do? And she's like, just do it. We have to do this. Like, this is our last chance possibly to secure this deal. So we're like, all right, bring them on. It's fine. And so we said, they chose this restaurant, which happened to be really expensive. And I honestly think this was all a ploy to freak us out. So they chose this really expensive restaurant. We went out to dinner, and honestly, we had just a really, really great time. We talked a lot about what they were doing for reporting today. So with a group that was a controllers group, and just spent a lot of time talking about that, and also just learning about them and who they were. And when the bill came for dinner, they actually picked it up. So they said, we invited all these people. We don't want to throw this on you guys. And we've had such a lovely time. And so they picked up the bill. Thank God I didn't have to explain that to my boss and how we were going to cover that one. And so I ended the dinner by saying, what we'd really like to do moving forward is just take a little bit of time at this conference to sit down with you guys. I can actually install our product right now and just show you in about 10 minutes how it would work, because I really feel like the impact of this product could save so much time in what you're doing today with your manual work out of SAP. And so they agreed to that. They agreed to this 10-minute quick install, quick demo of the product at the trade show. And so we did the install. Miraculously, everything worked, which very rarely happens in the software world. Everything worked. We were able to show them a successful demo, and they actually ended up purchasing Spreadsheet Server. So we got to say from that point forward, Microsoft Excel uses our product, which none of our competitors could say that. So that was a huge breakthrough in the market for us. But the reason I tell you that story is everything didn't go perfectly, right? I didn't even know if I was going to be able to pay for the dinner. We, really focused though on building a relationship with the client, learning about them, and just asking if they would take a chance on us and let us install the product right there at the trade show. And so there was a lot of kind of guts in that move, and saying, hey, I'm just gonna go for it this time, and I'm really gonna focus on building this relationship, and hopefully they'll like us enough to want to move forward. So building trust, really important to get started. Number 2 is determining needs. So one of the other important pieces of that dinner is I had a list of questions that I wanted to ask to understand what they were doing today and what was really causing them a lot of problems. So I asked a lot of questions that were based on their needs. And to me, I think that one of the greatest skills of successful salespeople is the ability to ask great questions. So whether you're selling to consumers or you're selling to companies, you have to understand their target market, and you have to understand what their focuses are. And that way you can present your product, a board game, a smooth shake, whatever it may be, based on what their focus and what their needs are. And then once you are able to determine needs, you can present your solution based on those needs. So once you understand what they want, presenting the right product or service to fulfill those needs is really easy, because you're just showing them how you can help them, and people want to help people. So it's really fun at that point to be able to present based on their needs. So here's the scary part: overcoming objections, right? This is the fear of selling. All my students are like, what if they ask me questions and I don't know the answer? I don't know what to do. But there's always going to be objections. So you have to be ready for the objections, expect the objections. And what I always like to say is welcome the objections. So when someone asks me a question or throws an objection at me, I always say, that's a fantastic question. A lot of the major objections are going to be price, timing, and money. And if you prepare on the front end, I have a great pre-call planning document that Raj will share with you in your homework. If you prepare for these on the front end, then you have those answers ready. So you should know going into a sale why people don't want to buy your product, and you should be prepared to tell them why they should. Last but not least, take action. So this is where you're closing the sale. And this is another piece that I feel like a lot of salespeople are scared of, is they're scared of asking for the contract. But if you've done everything right up until then, this should just be administrative work, right? So you have to just buckle up and ask them for the contract. Ask them to make a decision and ask them for a time. So your prospect, when they're walking into a sales process or when they agree to meet with you, they're actually expecting you to ask for a decision, right? They're expecting you to. It's not shocking to them. They also have fear in this part. So this is where salespeople can really take control and walk them through this part with ease. So I think that, using the example, just an Oregon example, kind of imagine that you're out at a restaurant and you find the perfect Oregon rain jacket, right? So I'm sorry, not a restaurant, but a store. You find the perfect Oregon rain jacket and it's all weather. It's not too hot, but it's fully waterproof. So this is like, to me, something I can never find, but I find this perfect rain jacket. And so after the salesperson walks me through why the product's perfect for me, then they take the jacket back and they put it back in the stock room. Why would you do that, right? I want to buy it. You just told me why it's perfect for me, and it showed it to me based on my needs. We walked out, I tried it on in the rain, and then you take it back. So just remember, when you're showing your product and they like it, they want to buy it. So you have to move forward and you have to ask for the sale. Any questions on the formula for success before we kind of get into developing the pitch?
Caitlin, there's one question about any advice you'd have on how to build trust in service-based industries. Or just generally, if you can speak to, it was nice to see that building trust is the very first thing that you do, even before you understand people's needs. Do you have any general tips for approaches to do that?
Yeah, building trust it's definitely tricky. It's tricky in every industry, right? But I think that because people are generally weary when they know that they're possibly could be sold something. But I think that being a human being and being honest with them about why you're there, not trying to be fake, I think is really important. So I think when you come to someone and you're honest about the fact that this is a sales process, but I have something that I really believe will help you, that's really important to start out. Another way to build trust, I feel like in any industry, is to utilize your current customer base, right? So if you have customers that know and love your product, so going back to my example of Microsoft, that was a name that we could drop at any point in time that everybody has heard of. And once they heard that that customer used our product, it immediately took down a wall. So I say always use your customers to your benefit. Let your customers speak for you. And don't be scared to talk to your current customers about talking to other customers. A great thing you can do on your website is to create customer profiles and customer references, so you have that information readily available for your prospects. Did that answer your question?
Who asked that question? I think it's Alex. Alex, does that answer your question?
Yeah, Alex said yes, thank you.
Great. Okay, so developing your perfect pitch. When you guys get into this exercise of building your elevator pitch, how do you do it? Well, I have a little formula here too. And so when you look at the screen here and you look at the before and the after scenarios, just think about that as before the customer company either sells your product or uses your product, and then after. So you really want to kind of paint that picture for your client of this is what you're doing today, and this is where we could be together afterwards. and then the negative consequences and positive outcomes that come from that. If you continue with the status quo of what you're doing today without our product, this is where we'll be, versus positive outcomes. If we move forward together, this is where we'll be. And then the other important thing is the required capabilities, how we do it better, and proof points. So one of the other big things that comes up in a sales process is competitors, right? So in a market where you're selling board games, back to your example, there's a lot of competition in the market. So your client has to be able to see not only the features of your product, but how you do it better, and the proof behind that. So what customers are using this and why did they like it? So this is kind of the mantra that I like to give new salespeople when they're starting out. After you've gone through your needs identification, you've gone through that list of questions to learn about your client, you're able to kind of follow that up with your customer by going through this mantra. What I'm hearing you say is these are the outcomes that you'd like to achieve. In order for you to achieve these positive business outcomes, these are the required capabilities that we've agreed you'll need. You probably want to measure those capabilities using these metrics. So this is where you're kind of painting the picture, the ROI for your client. And then let's walk through how we can do this today. So this is where we're setting a time for what we're going to do. Let's walk through how we can do this together moving forward. You're defining the partnership. Don't take my word for it. Talk to some of our customers that are using these products and talk about their experience. So this is kind of putting all of this together. If you were to have a short pitch, and have a short pitch that's really successful. So you're taking the client's needs and then putting them back in their own hands and how you can help with your product. Are there any questions here? I know we're getting close to our ending point or our time. So I know it seems like we're flying through a lot of this, but I want to make sure we stay on time. So I wanted to pull up this poll and ask, what are your biggest hurdles with the products or services that you're trying to sell and closing deals?
Corey, are you popping up the poll?
Budget is always a big one. Competing with lower cost providers, that was definitely dealt with quite often.
And Caroline Fisher also posted that her biggest hurdle is getting people to understand it.
Getting people to understand it. That's a huge one too. And again, if you have customers that are using the product, shared experiences are so important, because I think that when you have a customer speaking to another customer in their industry, it's so much easier for them to understand someone that understands their lingo versus a salesperson. Okay, so we have competing with low-cost providers, client budget, timing, other. Budget, price, those are ones that are so tricky. And when your prospect is focused solely on the sticker price of your offering, it's often a sign that they view your service as a commodity. So one way sales teams can counter this thinking is to know the prospect's business backwards and forwards. So in a Forrester report, it was discovered that 73% of buyers don't believe that salespeople are knowledgeable about their business. Isn't that crazy? 73% of buyers, they think that salespeople don't know anything about their business. So if you're a knowledgeable seller, you become less of a price tag and more of a value-added provider. And I think that this can be true for, for really any type of business, whether you're selling to a consumer or you're selling to a company. The other important thing that I think is a lot of salespeople don't do is they don't prepare. So they feel like they can kind of wing it in most scenarios. And I think preparation is key. So when you prepare for every interaction, and you focus on your client's needs in every interaction to satisfy them, it's really, really important, and it shows in your pitch. So you have to be strategic. You have to go into your pitch with a plan. You have to, as I like to say, play chess and not checkers. So you really need to have a 360-degree understanding of your prospect, their org chart, their partners, their competitors, before you go into a sales interaction with that prospect. Understand their evaluation process better than they do. Ask why. So when you don't understand something, ask why, dig deeper. Challenge their assumptions. They're expecting the conversation with a salesperson to be interactive. So don't just be a yes man and say yes to everything that they ask you. Challenge your assumptions. And if they say, it's really not in our budget this year, we really don't have the time, say, well, is it possible for us to talk a little bit more about how this could save you X amount of money, to account for definite cost savings moving forward. So ask the second question. Qualify constantly, and then also you can qualify out. There are some customers that aren't going to be a fit for you, and it's okay to say no to them too. So really preparing for every interaction, every email, every call, every meeting, every presentation, every negotiation is so important, because it will allow you to leave nothing to chance. So I think that as you learn more, as you prepare more, as you use that pre-call planning document before your next sales meeting, that will become more natural to you in the sales process. And then lastly, I would say that, taking in feedback and appreciating feedback is also very important. So be open to feedback from your customers, review, learn, improve. Every deal that I've ever lost, I've always gone back to the customer and asked why they chose the other partner over us. I want to know why we lost the deal. And I also want to keep that door open with the customer to move forward, especially if you're in an industry that constantly changes. So just because you lost that deal doesn't mean that you can't reach back out 6 months or a year and possibly win it. So you always want to reach out to your customers that said no, ask why, why they chose the other person, so you can continue to improve yourself. Okay. So these slides will be available to you guys. I have a pre-call planning document that is great for you to use to prepare for a pitch, as well as a link to some additional discovery questions. So these are questions that you can use when you are in a real life pitch with your prospect. And I think that's really all I have. I'll just leave you with this last slide and really what separates great sales teams from everybody else. And it's that empathy piece. It's being a human, figuring out how to help your customers and create relationships, organizing communities of customers to learn from each other. So when you're in a commodities-based selling world, I think that letting your customers sell for you is really important. And last but not least, putting your customers' needs first. So I will open it up for any questions at this point before we move into our breakouts.
Caitlin, this is Marty. I was thinking that maybe for the preparation, when you're preparing for the call, maybe this discovery questions list and trying to figure out a bunch of these answers before you even make the call might be a good tool. And maybe that's what you have this for. Because I'm thinking like the first question, tell me about your company. Whenever a salesperson calls me and says, tell me about my company, I say, politely as I can, look, I don't have the time to do your work for you. If you don't know about my company, then you have no idea if I'm a prospect or not. But so I was thinking a lot of these, like who makes the decisions and what are you responsible for? A lot of these things you can find out before you even make the call, it looks like. But,
absolutely. I agree with you 100%, Marty. And especially if you're dealing with a high level decision maker such as yourself, you don't want to leave a lot of that information that's available for you on the internet to waste time on in that call. So I pulled up this pre-call planning form, and this is part of your homework to fill this out for one of your customers. And so before any call, this is the information that I want to try to gather for myself before I even get on the call. So I have 6 questions, and I have tab 2 where you can ask those questions yourself or fill this out for your prospect. But I've kind of given you the answers to them. So what is your prospect's current situation, your goals for the customer, the values that they offer? What are your goals for the customer or prospect? What is my desired next outcome? What are my relative vulnerabilities? What actions do I need to take before the next call? So these are all things that I completely agree with you, Marty, that you should know before you even step into that meeting. And certainly any information that's available to you about that company and about the people that you're meeting with, you should know. So LinkedIn is a great tool for this. Before every call or every interaction, you should make sure that you have looked at the LinkedIn profile of everyone that you'll be speaking to on that meeting. So that way they don't have to go through that exhaustive effort of explaining themselves to you, and you can get to the point a little bit quicker.
And I want to say that Caitlin really walks the walk in this, in that in our very first interaction, it was very clear that she knew who she was talking to and was able to reference things about our businesses that made me immediately feel like, wow, this is somebody that has looked into us. And it does change the dynamic of the way the trust builds to feel like this person has done already the work to get to know you. So thanks for that, Caitlin.
Absolutely. Got to practice what you preach.
Yeah. Great, well, thanks. I think that we should probably dive into our breakouts and digest this a little bit more. So thank you, Caitlin, so much for this. And I'm sure that we'll have more conversation in the breakouts about everything. Just moving towards the little bit of follow-up for next week to clarify that we do have 2 videos now due on September 9th. I updated the slide to reflect that that first reflection is just a 30-second one with these 3 pieces that we saw the example of Ariel giving, and this is to help us present your benefits from this program to the wider audience, and hopefully a good chance for you to just reflect on what is the 1 or 2 things that I can distill down from this entire 10-week experience. And then the second part is that sales pitch that we just chatted about, and hitting on those 3 parts, the problem, solution, the ask, but making it more of a conversation and a dialogue-based presentation, even though it is going to be to your iPhone camera. And we're all excited, as Caroline mentioned, to work with you on it. So we'll look forward to the mentor hours and digging in a little deeper. Next week, we have Kent Lewis coming from Anvil Media to warm up what's going to be a lot of conversations that you'll all be having with him and his company. He's going to be talking about SEO, Google Analytics, and how to sell using social media. So this did come out of the cohort's request, the survey that we all put out to you on what information you'd like to dig deeper into. So really excited for that. He's a very lively person as well. And with that, oh yeah, our last part is please do remember we need you to sign up for the graduation. So they'll be sending out the link in the follow-up email. It's also in the homework. We dropped in the chat, but this is through Eventbrite. And because you've done so much work to get this far, we also want to celebrate you with your friends and family. So please feel free to share this link far and wide. As Caroline mentioned, there's going to be a couple hundred people on this call, including some fancy folks from higher levels that we're excited to have you be in front of. So we're really excited to organize this, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. Here's the mentor hours for the coming week. Just to say that these are going to be great sessions to practice the sales pitch, and these are also in the homework again, but same as regular, except that Corey's swapping in for Lauren next Monday. Okay, with that, thanks all for tuning in. Thanks again to Caitlin one more time for joining us. And yeah, we'll stick around for another 15 minutes or so. So if you do want to chat or digest anything, please feel free, but otherwise we'll see you next week.